Chitimacha is one of the few languages in the world that uses a rising intonation for statements and a falling intonation for questions. This is the opposite of how English works. And by the way, intonation is just pitch, but for language, just like musical pitch. So in Chitimacha, the way you say the man is eating is asi gushtishi, and you can hear that rise in pitch at the end. But if you want to say is the man eating, you say asi kushtishite, and you hear a slight rise, but then a fall at the end. So English is the opposite of this. If we say a statement, it's going to be a falling intonation. So I'm going to the store. But if you ask a question, it's a rising intonation. Are you going to the store? And if you ask an information question, same thing. Who's going to the store? About 85% of languages use falling intonation for statements, and about 70% of languages use rising intonation in questions. So there are other languages out there like Chitimacha that do the opposite, but they're a lot more rare. What's interesting is that in most languages, information questions tend to use falling intonation rather than rising intonation like they do in English. And this makes a lot of sense because for information questions, you've got the question word right there. You've got the who, what, when, where, why word right in the sentence. So you don't really need to rely on intonation. But for yes-no questions, sometimes languages only rely on changes in intonation to tell the difference between a statement and a question. We can actually do this in English. We can phrase a statement like a question. So you can say, he went to the store. It's not the default way of doing it, but it works. But in many languages, that is the default way of asking yes-no questions. In fact, Italian is like that. This sentence can either be a statement or a question depending on the intonation you say it with. However, most languages have an entire separate question word, a question particle, that indicates that a sentence is a question. So here's an example from the Ainu language spoken in Japan, where the word ya indicates that the sentence is a question. Now, English doesn't do this. English uses a change in word order to indicate yes-no questions. So we say, did the man go to the store, instead of the man went to the store. But this is actually really rare. In one survey, only 1.4% of languages used a change in word order to indicate yes-no questions. Another language that does this is Swedish, like you can see in this example. So tell me in the comments, how do the languages that you know do statements, yes-no questions, and information questions with intonation? Do they have rising or falling intonation for each one of those?